We ready? Cool. Hi, everyone. Before we start, I don't know if anyone's going to have a chance to thank the two people who did the most work to put this together, and that's Austin and Alex. So, big round of applause.
I just want to jump in. Also, D++. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, D++. It's been a wonderful 1.5 days, and I think everyone's been thrilled with like the content, the structure, the pacing. I thought the breakout groups yesterday were a really nice change of pace. So thanks so much, Austin. And yeah, everything went really well. So thanks, guys. So what are we going to talk about? I'm joined by two awesome people, Tadge and Clara, to talk about where do we go next. I thought the best way to talk about this is not really to go proposal by proposal, but instead think about different stakeholder groups in Bitcoin, like users and investors, developers, miners, and we'll see how much time we have to go through different groups. But go through each group and then just have a discussion about what do we learn and what do we think are reasonable steps for each group. So maybe we start with users. So just any user of the system, for any use case they might use Bitcoin, what should they do next? Maybe either of you can start.
I think most of the users, not much. Chillax. Probably you're using modern addresses, you're not address reusing. If you're doing everything okay right now, continue with your day, enjoy the summer, and so on. If you do have outdated addresses that we discussed here, you might want to consider moving the funds, but beyond that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, keep your software up to date, right? So if you're like, oh, I've got Bitcoin 0.9 from 2014 or something, and it's like, well, you probably should upgrade, but I mean, yeah, it's working, so you might not want to. But yeah, this is one thing where you might pay a little more attention and upgrade. But I do think it's the kind of, we don't want to make it something where you're telling the user, well, like lattices or Sphinx, because they're like, what? Like, so I don't think it's the necessarily normal user's responsibility to like have to do these things. Hopefully, the software developers can do that.
But like advice that we already give users that don't reuse addresses, we could just like double down on that advice and give yet another reason. And it might resonate with a segment of users who might be concerned about quantum. And then it's like, okay, this is one way I can protect myself.
Yeah, and tell them that like, hey, these wallets, don't reuse addresses, or won't reuse addresses, or like have better properties. So like use this. It's hard to. And you can also tell them, hey, don't. Or like, hey, I want to recommend silent payments, but I don't think silent payments works with post-quantum stuff, right? So, but it's hard because it's like changing a behavior that maybe they're very used to. But you can still try to tell them like, hey, and the distinction of reuse as in you can give an address and receive multiple payments and then spend all those at the same, and then use a new address. So it's a little tricky, like what you're actually preventing.
Another tricky one would be taproot addresses, meaning it seems a little painful to not recommend using taproot addresses, but there's a little bit of conflict there.
Just about taproot addresses, I think right now there's no reason not to use them. It's of course a personal opinion, but for now, keep using taproot addresses until when we'll get to the developers and researchers. Other modern solutions will be out there, but right now I see no reason not to use taproot addresses, especially if you're not moving funds that, if you're not going to be one of the first 100 targets, yeah, go ahead, use taproot.
Another controversial one would be seedless is safer. So BitKey, spicy. Because BitKey has been promoting that. I'm actually personally an advocate for products that don't use seed phrases. Jameson's here. Casa, I know, at least historically, sort of recommended against using them, but maybe you guys have changed your stance over time. But there's definitely, I mean, that's a whole nother separate topic, but just to add to that debate is there might be a future where seed phrase helps you prove that these are my coins that were frozen and get them back. So that just adds to that spicy debate. Okay, so we covered users. Let's talk about developers next. And I don't know if you want to lump researchers and developers together. Up to you.
Yeah, I think the obvious thing to do is like work on this stuff. But at the same time, there will be people who, developers who do not want to work on this. And it makes sense. Like, there's already this kind of thing where like there's a lot of core developers who like do not want to be involved in consensus changes, right? Whether it's PTSD from, SegWit or for a lot of things, it's just like, look, I don't, it's a decentralized system, and there's like an inherent tendency for things to start centralizing and there to be like leaders and, stuff like that. And so it's sort of an active thing of like, I'm not in charge of this, or like, I don't make these changes. And I think some of the post-quantum stuff is like an extreme example of that, where like, I'm not going to merge the code that like destroys 6 million coins. Like, no, like who's going to do that? It's just sort of like, no, I'm not merging that. I'm like, there's like, going to be a lot of like, I'm not touching that, because not even legal. Like, what if there's someone who's got millions of dollars of coins that you just destroy? Like it's like you don't like. It's really hard. I think there may it may be that there's new developers or new people that are like, okay, I'll make that. Like a lot of times the code itself isn't that complex. It's more of a, I don't want to be responsible for this. So I think the safe things to work on, like hash-based signatures, and like there's a lot of cool stuff there. And like let's look at these kinds of how do we add new things. The controversial stuff I can definitely see. Like I personally like I kind of don't want to touch it, right? And I think a lot of other Bitcoin developers are like, kind of want to stay away from that stuff. It's still
except
cool
for your commit and reveal proposal.
Well, that's why I was like, this works, and that was why it was good yesterday. I was like, this works with either freeze or burn. But then like people ask questions and pointed things out. I'm like, ooh, like it does kind of tend towards freeze. I should like make it more, but it's yeah. So it's like, hey, here's an option. Like I'm not going to make a PR to Bitcoin Core with that stuff. I want to like put out options and stuff. But I think, and that's where we are right now. It's not like, hey, let's activate this. It's like, okay, here's options, here's code. That's my thinking, and I think there will be new like it just seems like you're going to have new developers come in, and whether that's good or bad, I don't know. Yeah,
Pseudonyms probably as well.
Maybe
help protect you.
Yeah.
So maybe things like Lifeboat or things like that can be worked on, but I think most of the heavy lifting that has to do with the cryptography, we're not there yet. So maybe this is, if we're talking about researchers and developers together, we're still waiting for cryptographers that are well-versed in Bitcoin to look over the options, to think. So on that end, I think there are some peripheral projects to work on, but on the hardcore things, we're just not there yet.
Yeah, and it's like one of the cool things about the discussion yesterday was like, how would you even implement freeze, right? And it's like, oh, it feel like, and there's a lot of like pushback, like, no, this is like kind of impossible to implement. It's like, well, it's possible. So it's like good to have discussion, but it is a weird scenario where I think a lot of existing Bitcoin developers will not necessarily want to be involved, and so it makes complete sense why. And so I think it's an interesting time where I would say like, yeah, let's welcome external developers, people that haven't really worked on Bitcoin before, to try to contribute and maybe help them and stuff. But it's like there's definitely going to be some hesitancy from a lot of existing developers, I think.
For researchers, what are your thoughts on? I mean, there's a lot of cryptography researchers who have nothing to do with Bitcoin, who are trying to advance post-quantum cryptography. How should researchers within Bitcoin, like yourself, think about this? And is there room to try to encourage and advocate further advances there, or accelerating, or
So
is it already going as fast as it possibly can?
I don't know if it's going as fast as it can, especially outside of the Bitcoin space, just because in academia, as in everywhere, it's a question of funding. But there are the even signature schemes that we feel comfortable with, that have been around for a while. For example, we don't have key aggregation. We don't have a lot of the things that we want to make the transition as seamless as possible. So there are really concrete, well-defined research questions out there. And I think you need to know more about cryptography than about Bitcoin. It's good to know in which space you're living, but yeah, I think this is the skill set that we need in where we are right now.
I just saw something going back to users. So just general users, if they're not technical, they're not going to be in a position to help with some of these challenging technical problems. But some of the questions before us are philosophical, and that's something that's accessible to anyone. So, like continuing to have discussions about burn versus freeze and other philosophical questions, that's another thing that interested parties, if you're super passionate about this, if you're super worried about this, that is something that anyone could participate in various discussion forums.
Although honestly, to make these discussions in some way fruitful, you probably want to be data-driven, look for other examples, look like, it's a free world. You can go out there and shout on the internet whatever you want. But yeah, it's a beautiful weather almost everywhere, so maybe you should just go on a walk.
But no, I mean that you're gonna have that, and sure, like but in terms of users, like I hope that it's not a case where developers are also giving, like, on the one hand, choice is great, but it's like you don't give users choice. Like OpenSSL is great. Like, hey, do you want to use ECB or CBC? And you're like, I don't ECB. Oh no, you lost everything, right? So it's like, hey, do you want to use? Here's all these like choices. It's pretty dangerous. And if one of the choices, hey, do you like destroying all those coins or like letting them be stolen? It's like, well, is that going to be like a drop-down menu in Bitcoin Core? Like, I don't know.
Also, it's not happening anytime soon, so it's like you can have like a very long argument now, and then in 5 years, a bunch of new people, like it's a strange time.
Yeah. If you're,
as a user to consider this, you're more than welcome, but yeah.
I hope this doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be super surprised if there ends up being a deep disagreement and a fork, right? If you long term, you say like, no, we have to destroy these coins, no, we have to let them be stolen, and then you have two different coins, and in that case, users should definitely take their coins off an exchange, have the access to their coins, so they can, do the sell one, buy the other kind of thing if they want.
Speaking about exchanges, users can clap at exchanges that are doing address reuse.
Yeah, well, that's one of the next.
This is a very good use.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk about businesses. But I would just say, first of all, I agree. The burn versus freeze, I think, is the hardest question out of all the ones discussed and posed the past 2 days. I agree with high risk of fork. But that's also why having discussions over time and development of thought and socializing that does have value. And I'm certainly not advocating. I don't think this is like so urgent of a problem that everyone has to be participating in this conversation every day. But even just a small percentage of people who are into Bitcoin who are intellectually fascinated by this, philosophically fascinated by it, and care about the long term of Bitcoin, if they contribute content and thought and improve that over time, it might be multiple waves, like this cycle and then the next cycle, but we keep improving that thought, and it could decrease the chances of a fork in the future.
Just remember not to feed the trolls.
Right. So let's see. Let's segue to businesses because you're
Can I
just
have to
talking.
do one researchers? If you are
yeah.
a quantum computing researcher, and you break SecP, please make a proof and don't steal coins. that will like make everything so much easier. Like, look, we have a proof that this actually exists. Then we know what to do.
White hat, good.
What?
White hat,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I
Yes.
mean, if you're at a university,
Businesses, yeah. So what should like the Binances of the world and what should they do? What are their next
Stop
steps?
reusing addresses. It's so easy.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yeah, and have users start complaining, and I think that that's one of the good things of like the outcomes of this is if you start to have investors or people saying like, hey, wait, these nerds in San Francisco that work on this cryptography and Bitcoin stuff, they say that what you're doing is risky. And like, it's like, well, no, it's complicated. There's like a million different things, but it's like, yeah, essentially, there's no downside, right? Like if you just don't reuse addresses, there's really no extra downside. It's just that you, I don't know, wrote the software 10 years ago or something.
So that's another thing that users can do, right?
Right.
Like if you're a customer of Binance or any exchange that's reusing addresses, complain.
Or move to one that doesn't do, there are exchanges that have better security practices and stuff, so.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. What else should businesses be doing, thinking about? Nothing else?
Funding developers and researchers.
Sounds good to me.
Come to these be at these kind of conferences. If there's people who work at exchanges or ETFs or who are like in that side, it would be cool to hear their opinions on these things and what they're thinking about. So.
Yeah.
Also, if you have any questions, again, address reuse or things like that, there's a bunch of people that will be more than happy to explain how to avoid this, what should be done. It's there are people that would love to help, so we're here.
How about miners? And we already see some miners doing things. Several of them, attended, spoke, and are proposing solutions. Anything else miners should be doing as next steps?
Maybe be careful if this whole discussion of burn versus steal does heat up. Be careful because I think you'll get side-eyed, like as an interested party. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything directly that miners like. If things start getting crazy, they need to pay attention and start being like, oh, we got to pick software, we got to pick if there's a fork or something. But right now it doesn't seem, from my understanding, from talking to different mining, their focus isn't cryptography or elliptic, it's like we have the hardware, so it's not necessary at this point. It doesn't seem something that's like super miner involved. Hopefully we don't get to the point where it does become miner involved. We're like, hey, there's these soft forks and there's these, but that may happen.
So maybe the last group we cover, investors, and perhaps this is the most important one in the sense that maybe that group is the most sensitive to this issue, or at least some portion of investors or prospective investors. They're not yet into Bitcoin, they're attracted to it, but they're concerned about this issue. So what would be some thoughts and advice for them?
So maybe returning for the advice with the users. Don't address reuse. Talk to entities that do address reuse, because if there's going to be a huge disaster, it's going to affect all of us.
Yeah, I mean, if investors can, because it does seem like from the talk yesterday, most of the address reuse is like investor, it's not individuals, or at least in aggregate, the majority is exchanges, ETF kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, you can fix this and protect yourselves and your investments. So that's a pretty easy one. I think the interesting one is investors that are not invested in Bitcoin right now, potentially because of and that's one of the reasons I got interested in this. I was like talking to someone and being like, oh, I bet there's never going to be a quantum computer. And he's like, well, I take that bet, and that's why I don't have Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, shoot, I should think about it, because I want more people to be able to use Bitcoin. And that's not a crazy worry. I may disagree with that worry, but it's like that's why I sort of said it as a bet, because it's like, yeah, we both have legitimate opinions, but I'm like, no, we shouldn't push away people that have this idea, and so I think that's one of the reasons to do this. Even if you don't think there's very much risk of this happening, to have stuff in place so that people can say, okay, they're actually paying attention to this. They're not just completely, putting their head in the sand or whatever. For the people that think it's a real risk, I have heard that they're like, hey, how come no core developers want to talk to us about this at a conference 2 years ago? And I was like, well, yeah, I get it. And and so I've definitely talked to not as technical, but lawyers and investors and stuff that were concerned about this. Mostly because it's there's government top down, hey guys, 2030 or 2035, you need to change the NIST, whatever. And then they're like, well, Bitcoin's not doing that. So if if the government says you have to and Bitcoin doesn't, what do we do? And from like Bitcoin developers, we're like, we don't care what the government says. Like, but it is like, I think it could be good for these, you know, potential investors to say, okay, now we're interested that people are like looking at these problems and they're not going to ignore it. So like we can become involved, we can start investing as well.
I also think, I mean, this event itself has produced a lot of great thinking, content. We're recording this and we'll publish it for those who missed the live stream. So that'll be available for investors. There's several people who attended who I know are going to create summaries or content. And Shinobi's going to, and I think he maybe even interviewed some of the people here. I think in a few, I don't know if they want to be named. So a few other people might be writing summaries. So I think that'll be good content for investors and hopefully accessible for investors. What about it might be good from developers, and it could just be simply one developer, but like write up as unbiased as possible of summary of like here are the technical options. Here's like 3 different roadmap options, and needs to be framed properly. That this isn't like the core dev roadmap position, but here's reasonably well thought out roadmap options. Here's the trade-offs, the remaining questions. I think that would and make that create an accessible language to the broader Bitcoin population. I think that would be valuable. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and so, I mean, writing it up, and also the things that were not, so like, this is like version 1, this conference. There were a lot of things being talked about that I was talking to people about today, yesterday, there were no talks of, because we hadn't even really thought through. And so it was like, yeah, well, if we start talking about forks, because no one really wants that to happen, but it's like, wait, if we did, how are the dynamics going to work in these cases? Like we have some experience from 2017 and seeing what happened there, but this would be pretty different because now there's like these replays and quantum computing, and interestingly seeing, oh wait, if you moved Bitcoin Cash but left your pay to pub key hash from back then, actually wait, you did reveal the pub key, and like things like, so there's a lot of interesting things going on with forks that could be an interesting discussion. It's also a kind of weird discussion because you're like, well, I hope none of this happens, but if it did, and I don't like, does talking about it make it more likely to happen? Kind of. So I think there's a lot of new topics that we can sort of get into just from like learning about what everyone else is thinking here.
So I do think we need like a summary of these events. Maybe we need more events like this, but it has to do with what I said earlier. It's probably too early to have like a Bitcoin roadmap because we don't know which signatures we're going to use. We don't know enough at this point. So this is time to think about it, learn.
And Bitcoin roadmaps never work. Yeah. Like no,
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm more like, if I'm an investor, I'm not super deep in the technicals. I'm worried about quantum. I do think a summary would be helpful to be like, okay, here's the 5 most pressing questions. Some of which are like post-quantum cryptography, and then like, if we had to do it in the next year or 2, here are the options and the drawbacks and trade-offs. And then projecting forward some unknown amount of time, but like in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, we just expect that to continue to improve. But just a summary like that would be valuable, and it's not like committing anyone to anything. It's not a roadmap, but it's just sort of an accurate picture.
Yeah. And can put it in context, because I think it could be very disruptive. Like you don't want to be like, oh yeah, we got this, we're figuring it out. Like it could be extremely disruptive. If a quantum computer happens soon, but you have to put it in context. Like other things would also get pretty messed up if that, because that's sort of a surprise. Like all these things break. But, to be fair, probably Bitcoin more than most other things. And so you don't want to be like, oh yeah, we got this, like, but sort of say like, look, yeah, if it happens in the next couple of years, it's significant impact to Bitcoin, and, it's going to be a big mess. So if you're an investor and you're worried, like, I think that, this is going to happen soon, then maybe don't invest as much. Like we don't, we're not shilling it, right? But sort of put these risks and, parameterize everything and say like, okay, but yeah, one of the things that's hard is we don't know. There's so many unknowns about these things, so we can't really tell what's going to happen.
To advocate for the summary, I think it's valuable because without it, if I'm an investor and it just, to me, sounds like they haven't even thought about it. No one's thought about this. And so if it did happen in the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever, just in my calculus would be like, it's over, it's dead. And that could very well be true. But if we share, here are 3 options of what we would do in an emergency or panic, there's some probability of Bitcoin not dying. And then they can then enter that into their expected value calculation for their investment.
So not to toot my own horn, but this is sort of what we try to do in the report. We say there, we go over possible signatures and things like that. We have a timeline. And I don't see a realistic way of saying more, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can. This is you get ideas from. One of the things we do need more, like with the first talk here, was okay. I don't know that much about quantum computers, right? Like, should we be talking more to people who are researching these things and having ideas of what? And that's one of the things they said. Like, in 5 years, we'll have a much better understanding of the roadmap of how these things are going to develop. And so definitely we'll keep paying attention to that. And I definitely search for news on quantum computing and read Microsoft major and then controversy. So it's like we're paying attention, but it is still a very unknown place we're going.
Austin, do you want us to open up to audience questions or even ideas, or we can
If anyone has anything, any comments, questions,
Looking to what to work on.
hot takes. 1, 2.
This was really great. Summit, very high signal, and I think we got a lot of alignment, or at least brought a lot of things to surface. Are there already existing avenues like groups or mailing lists or some things where we can continue the conversation and kind of get more towards this is where most up-to-date information is going to be shared, and if one doesn't exist, maybe this could be a good group to bootstrap one.
I'll share a few thoughts. Well, first of all, an idea for Austin and Alex, we have the Presidio Bitcoin public Discord, and so we could have a channel for this event and continue discussion there. That's one idea.
Yeah, just another shout out to D++. She brought up that idea yesterday. We did create a Signal group chat, which we were going to share, but we could turn that into a different format if another one's better.
Yeah, and in terms of public, everyone, there's the existing Bitcoin Dev mailing list, which is where I would say half the stuff now is being posted about post-quantum stuff, right? It's in the last few months, it's definitely not taken over. There's lots of other stuff too, but it's one of the main topics there. And then Delving Bitcoin, which is run by AJ, I feel like there's not as much as quantum stuff there as the mailing list, but both are good places.
And for those unfamiliar, Bitcoin-Dev mailing list, I think, is the highest quality. It's also a higher bar to post and respond. So which is what usually delivers the higher quality. But there's different types of communication that people want to engage in. It can also be, that type of list can be intimidating for a lot of people because am I worthy to even post here? Delving is a little bit lower bar, but still pretty high quality. And then I think the Presidio Bitcoin Discord can be for all of us. So, and then Twitter is definitely for everyone.
So this is maybe kind of too not abstract enough of a question or something, but I'm just find something kind of not satisfying about the situation with Taproot outputs. I wonder if like this is less a question. I guess this is more a thought. But I wonder if like it like for something like lifeboat or whatever it's called. If it would make sense to like recommend that like Taproot, when you make a like wallets should make script paths always for Taproot addresses or something like that. That would, if that was happening, then Taproot would have the same level of like whatever next step option or something like that.
That's the Blue Mat proposal, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that's but I think that recommendation, because it's really low cost, right? You just say, look, wallet software should also include a script path, even if it's just one key, also include a script path with basically the same key. I mean, it can't be exactly the same key, but similar key. Because then you do have this option to do sort of some kind of commit reveal or other proofs that are quantum secure. And most wallets do not do that right now. But it's so that would be a good change, I think, for developers. The only reason not to is like, oh, we don't want to because it's we don't think this is an issue. But it's like, well, come on, it's a pretty easy thing to change, and it has really no downsides. So yeah, I like it too. So let's merge it into Core Wallet. Let's ask as I have it here.
All right. I guess the last question is, where is the picnic?
Yeah.
We'll figure that out and we'll let you know. I think it's Picnic Place or something. All right, let's give a round of applause.